Hey there everyone, how's it going today? I am the Perpetual Noob, and welcome to my first attempt at the Vault of Glass raid. Today's video is all post-commentary because, like the title says, I need some new audio equipment. My current audio setup doesn't allow me to record my party's chat and my own chat, so rather than listen to me talk like I've got voices in my head, even though I kinda do, I'm going to talk during the highlights of our excursion into the Vault of Glass, which is also why this video is so short. We've actually spent about an hour and a half going from where you see now to just before Atheon. But before we get to all of that, let's just take a moment to appreciate how cool it looks to see all of these ships flying towards the planet's surface. Please, Bungie, can we please get some space combat in some DLC? I know there's gonna be more than the House of Wolves or Wolves House or whatever you're calling the new one. Please, that would be so great. So, our leader decided to technically cheese the first portion of the mission. Big L went in and did it solo, so that's how we ended up starting inside the vault already, specifically in the Templar's Hall. And it's called the Templar's Hall because of a giant Hydra that lives there. So, some impressions of the Vault of Glass and the first raid, and my first attempts at the raid. The combat is intense. It requires incredible coordination to successfully complete any portion of the combat in the Vault of Glass raid. This first area, this Templar's Hall, involves waves and waves of Vex rushing at us from certain points, from certain spawn points, to sacrifice themselves at confluxes. If they sacrifice enough of themselves, we all die and start from our last checkpoint. Due to having only 5 people for this part, I mean, don't let that 6th, Malvado78 fool you, his internet connection was terrible and ultimately he didn't stick around. He wasn't able to stay through the entire raid. At the start of the Templar's Hall, there's only one central conflux, which is actually behind us right now. And then eventually, after, I'm guessing, we kill enough Vex or we live long enough, there will instead be 2 confluxes closer to the Vex spawn points on the left and right side of this hall. And then finally, there will be 3 confluxes, 1 left, 1 right, and 1 in the center. And eventually at some point, which again I have no idea if this whole thing is time-based or kills-based, you win this portion of the Vault of Glass, and you'll start the next phase of the Templar fight. Then, yeah, I know, right? You only go into the second phase of the Templar fight. Not even done with it. So there is a new type of enemy introduced in the Vault of Glass. They're called Fanatics. They are armored Vex, so they've got yellow health bars, that run straight for confluxes. When they are killed, they leave a pool of green stuff. Acid, mystical, magical green stuff, I don't know. However, I do know that if you touch this green stuff, you become tainted and must cleanse yourself. And the only place to cleanse yourself in this area is at a well that sits just in front of that giant Hydra. So in addition to essentially having to risk your life and jump in front of the Hydra to, save yourself, the timing is really quick. So from like the moment you get tainted, you'll see your screen kind of go all green. There'll be a green tint to it. And there's a Fanatic right now. You'll see your screen go all green, and then you've got, I don't even know, I think it's maybe 10 seconds. I mean, you can see my screen, it's green already, but it's almost impossible to tell, and blep. Yep. That's how quick it happens. Screen goes green, got about 5 seconds, maybe 10. Now, I honestly only succeeded once in cleansing myself after becoming tainted. So eventually you just do everything you can to avoid the green stuff. Once we've successfully defended, I should say, all 3 confluxes, we move on to the next phase of the Templar fight. Instead of defending anything, we have to survive while shooting down these floating orbs of light called oracles. Each oracle produces a distinct tone, which helps with identifying which one is spawn. You can happen to hear it right then at the beginning, which is a nice thing that the game does. It gives you a heads up of, hey, each oracle sounds like this, and it also shows you their spawn points, so it's kind of a nice thing because the oracles have set spawn points. Now each oracle though needs to be destroyed quickly. If even one is not destroyed fast enough, we all die. It's kind of like a crazy game of Simon, because not only do you have to stay on top of all these oracles, there are still waves of Vex flooding the hall trying to kill us. And of course, let's not forget about the hobgoblins chilling on the edges of the hall. Big L stayed on sniper duty, which is essentially what we were calling it, well, whoever was dealing with the hobgoblin snipers, but that left Smeezy McTeasy, who you may all remember from the Dark Souls Dark Bros brief playthrough we did. He's my brother. We were on the right side, and so we were left in charge of dealing with the oracles and other Vex as they came in. Now that may seem a little bit lopsided in terms of responsibilities, but Big L was also very quick to respond to any oracles, and it also really did help us that he kept the snipers down, because otherwise we just keep getting picked off. And you may be saying to yourself, holy cow, that's a lot of coordination required. And you are correct. So if one guardian happens to go down, things can get really out of hand pretty damn fast. And once you live long enough, or kill enough enemies, again, I don't know if it's, maybe it's actually kill enough oracles. I don't know. I didn't really count while we were doing this, and didn't really ask, and everyone else who's already done the Vault of Glass once or twice didn't know the answer either. But once you survive long enough against the oracles, you finally move on to the third and final phase of the Templar fight. And the third phase of the Templar fight involves picking up a relic that will start in the center, essentially where that well is, where you can get cleansed, and use that relic to bring down the Templar. It's the only item that can actually bring down the Templar's barrier. You know how you're used to seeing most Hydras with a rotating barrier, you know, around them, like if you went into a Sekrion fight in the Nexus, or just found a Hydra in your exploration or other story missions, their barrier rotates around them. Well, from here, as you can see, the Templar's barrier is permanent and completely surrounds the Templar. Well, that's what the relic is for. The relic can actually drop the Templar's shield, at least temporarily. And while we were discussing this, you know, our strategy for dealing with the Templar and this third phase of the Templar fight, Dr. Silas, who has done the Vault of Glass before, decided to essentially go all and grab the shield before any of us were actually ready to start this fight. And what do you know? We all wiped. Just thank goodness the game had a checkpoint that was essentially right where we were anyway, so we didn't really lose any progress. So the third phase of the fight requires the relic bearer to shoot the Templar's barrier. That exposes the Templar for a few moments so we can actually damage the Templar. Then the Templar eventually, you know, again after a few short moments, teleports somewhere else in the hall. The relic bearer has to charge the relic again, because shooting the relic is essentially, it's super, so it has to still charge up. The charge rate is pretty fast, but there's still time that needs to be taken to charge it up. Once the relic is charged again, the relic bearer shoots down the barrier, we damage the Templar. It's a lather, rinse, repeat kind of process. But, oh, did I mention that harpies are spawning everywhere, and the oracles continue to spawn as well? Yeah. Everyone needs to stay on top of all of that, too. And if the fight wasn't difficult enough, or requiring enough coordination, there are these lockdown bubbles. I call them bubbles. I'm sure there is an official name for them, but they're kind of like bubbles to me. When the Templar is exposed, random members of the group will be locked down inside this bubble, unable to move and unable to shoot anything but the bubble that's surrounding them. Once enough damage is done to the bubble, though, the prisoner finally regains their normal movement and can actually shoot things aside from the bubble. The way we made this work is that someone stayed with the relic bearer in the event that they got trapped in one of these bubbles, because the relic bearer is unable to actually take down the bubble themselves, so they need somebody from the outside to shoot the bubble and break it. And eventually, with enough coordination and enough perseverance, we are actually able to take down the Templar. After the Templar fight, we go further into the vault, and I skipped this whole portion because in reality it was a lot of long drops where you have to time your boost at just the right moment so you don't die from fall damage. And then we go to the Gorgon's Maze. Now, the Gorgon's Maze is really cool. Like, I love its concept because you have to sneak past all these harpies that are super strong and super powerful. Because if one of these harpies spots you, or spots anybody in your party, everybody in the party is going to die after about 10 seconds. It seems that the game gives you about 10 seconds to kill a Gorgon, but like I said, they're wicked hard to kill, and they work kind of like a Highlander, because once you kill one, the rest become stronger, so it becomes even harder to kill any subsequent Gorgons. And yes, would it have been really cool to show you some stealth elements of the game? Yeah, of course. Because what is something I've kind of hoped to see in this game? A stealth element every, maybe once in a while, once in a few missions, there's some stealth. And they finally put it in this raid. But I don't show it because we actually kind of cheesed it, where Big L ran through the maze, eventually got to the other side of it, and we then joined up with him by going out to orbit and then coming back in. So that's kind of boring, and I didn't really want to show you that. Sorry. Hope you can forgive me, but it was boring. We just sat around and waited. Next, we move on to the jumping puzzle, which essentially requires maximum agility, certainly for the way we went about solving it. And there are two ways to conquer this puzzle. One way is by way of the reconstructing platforms and trying to time your jumps to when platforms will appear and disappear. The other is what I'm attempting here, going to the right and making a long jump to a tiny little ledge that's available to us. It's not so bad once you get the timing, it just, takes a little while to figure out the timing. And then there's the invisible wall along this ledge that you've got to watch out for, which again takes a couple of tries. But I eventually get past it. And then on to the last section. This part of the raid is the part just before Atheon, and involves warping through portals and defending these sync plates. But at this point, it was so late. We had been at this for so long that we were starting to all get tired, and we weren't sure how keen we were on actually continuing on even to Atheon, especially because we had trouble completing even this section. And after we wiped, we kind of talked about it, and we just said, you know what, forget it. We'll stop today. Because, oh god, we don't want to keep going. So the others decided to just farm Glimmer, and I decided to head off to bed. It was, I don't know, I think it was like 2 in the morning or something. It was crazy. So thank you everyone for joining me on this first glimpse of the Vault of Glass. I hope you enjoyed, and stick around because there will be a part 2. It will be more complete, and we will actually fight Atheon, so I do hope you join me for that. I am the Perpetual Noob, and I hope to see all of you next time.